Imagine being erased, not killed, not exiled, erased. Your name chiseled off every wall, your face scratched from every statue, your city buried under sand as if it never existed. That's what happened to one of the most powerful men in ancient Egypt, a pharaoh who ruled over millions and was then deleted from history so completely that for over 3,000 years, no one even knew he existed. His name was Akhenaten, and this is the story of the man who tried to change everything and almost did. To understand Akhenaten, you need to understand the world he was born into. Egypt in 1370 BCE was the most powerful civilization on Earth. The Nile flooded every year like clockwork, feeding millions. The army was feared across the entire known world. And the pharaoh, well, the pharaoh wasn't just a king, he was a god. But there was a catch. The real power in Egypt didn't just belong to the pharaoh, it was shared with the priests. Egypt had hundreds of gods: Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, Anubis. And for every god, there was a temple. And for every temple, there were priests. And those priests had land, wealth, and influence that rivaled the crown itself. The most powerful of all were the priests of Amun, the king of the gods. For generations, pharaohs and priests had coexisted in an uneasy balance. The pharaoh needed the priests to legitimize his divine rule. The priests needed the pharaoh to protect their temples and their wealth. It was a system that had worked for over 1,000 years. Then came Akhenaten. Akhenaten was born Amenhotep IV, the second son of Pharaoh Amenhotep III, one of Egypt's greatest rulers. His older brother Thutmose was the crown prince, the heir, the chosen one. But Thutmose died young, and suddenly, the quiet, unusual second son was next in line for the most powerful throne on earth. What do we know about young Amenhotep IV? Not much, but what we do know is strange. He was depicted differently from other pharaohs. Elongated skull, wide hips, a long, narrow face. Whether this was a real physical condition, an artistic style, or something else entirely, historians still debate it today. What's clear is that from the beginning, he didn't fit the mold. When his father died around 1353 BCE, Amenhotep IV became pharaoh. He was probably in his late teens or early 20s. Egypt had no idea what was coming. Within the first years of his reign, the new pharaoh made a move no one expected. He declared that Egypt would now worship a single god, not Amun, not Ra, not any of the hundreds of gods Egyptians had prayed to for millennia. The Aton. The Aton was the sun disk, not the sun god Ra, not a figure with a human face, but the raw physical disk of the sun itself. Pure light, pure energy. A god with no myths, no stories, no temples full of statues. Just the sun. This wasn't just a religious preference, it was a revolution. For the first time in Egyptian history, a pharaoh was declaring monotheism, the worship of one god and one god only. And to make his commitment absolutely clear, he changed his own name. Amenhotep, which meant Amun is satisfied, became Akhenaten, he who works for the Aton. He was rewriting not just religion, he was rewriting himself. The priests of Amun watched, and they began to worry. But renaming himself wasn't enough. Akhenaten wanted a clean break, a new Egypt. And that meant a new capital. He chose a stretch of empty desert on the east bank of the Nile, a place with no history, no temples, no priests, a blank canvas. He called it Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten. Today we call it Amarna. What happened next was extraordinary. Within just a few years, an entire city rose from the sand. Palaces, temples, roads, homes for tens of thousands of people. Akhenaten moved the entire royal court there. Government officials, artists, soldiers, servants, all relocated to this brand new city in the desert. And the temples built there were unlike anything Egypt had seen. No roofs, no dark inner sanctuaries where priests performed secret rituals. Instead, open courtyards flooded with sunlight because the Aton didn't live in the dark. The Aton was the light. Akhenaten also oversaw an explosion of art. Egyptian art had barely changed in 1,000 years, stiff, formal, idealized. Akhenaten ordered something radically different, realistic art. Pharaohs shown eating, playing with their daughters, kissing their wives. His wife, by the way, was Nefertiti, one of the most famous faces in all of human history. Their partnership was unlike anything seen in Egyptian royalty before. She appeared beside him as an equal, sometimes even depicted smiting enemies, a pose reserved exclusively for pharaohs. For a brief moment, Amarna glittered. But Akhenaten wasn't done. If the Aton was the only god, then the other gods had to go. He ordered the temples of Amun closed, their wealth seized, their priests stripped of power. Then he went further. Workers were sent across Egypt with chisels to carve the name Amun off every monument, every wall, every inscription in the country. Even the name of his own father, Amenhotep. Amun is satisfied was defaced. This wasn't just religious reform. This was an attack on the entire fabric of Egyptian society. The priests lost their income, their status, their purpose. The people lost the gods they had prayed to their entire lives, the gods their parents had prayed to and their grandparents before them, and there was no one to complain to. Because Akhenaten didn't just say he represented the Aten, he said he was the sole intermediary between the Aton and all of humanity. Only through Akhenaten could anyone access the divine. In one move, he had concentrated all religious power in himself and made enemies of nearly everyone. Then, around 1336 BCE, Akhenaten died. We don't know how, diseased most likely, though theories range from plague to assassination. He was probably in his mid-30s or early 40s, and everything he built collapsed almost immediately. His successor, possibly his own son, possibly a co-ruler named Smenkhkare, ruled briefly. Then came a boy king who would become far more famous than Akhenaten ever was, Tutankhamun. Yes, King Tut was almost certainly Akhenaten's son. And one of Tutankhamun's first acts as pharaoh, guided by powerful advisors, was to undo everything his father had done. The capital moved back. The temples of Amun reopened. The old gods returned. And then came the erasure. Akhenaten's name was chiseled off monuments. His city of Amarna was dismantled, its stones reused for other buildings. His statues were smashed, his images destroyed. The priests and officials who had suffered under him made sure that future generations would never even know he existed. They called him simply the criminal or the enemy in the few records that mentioned him at all. For 3,300 years, he was gone. Akhenaten was rediscovered in the 19th century when archaeologists began excavating Amarna and found the remnants of his city buried under the desert. And since then, the debate has never stopped. Was he a visionary? A madman? The world's first monotheist? Some scholars have even drawn a connection between Akhenaten's Aton worship and the later development of monotheistic religions, though this remains highly controversial. What we know for certain is this: he looked at a civilization that had been running the same way for over 1,000 years, decided it was wrong, and tried to change everything. He wasn't cautious, he wasn't gradual. He tore it all down at once and built something new in the desert. It lasted about 17 years. History is full of people who tried to reshape the world in their own image. Some are remembered as geniuses, some as tyrants, most as both. Akhenaten might be the most extreme example of all, a man so thoroughly erased that he almost doesn't exist. Almost. If you made it this far, thank you, genuinely. If this video made you think, or if you learned something you didn't know before, hit subscribe. Every week we cover a new story from history, ancient, modern, empires, leaders, in less than 12 minutes. Next week, we're leaving ancient Egypt and jumping to 1914, the day a single gunshot in a small European city set off a chain of events that killed 20 million people. How did one assassination start the deadliest war the world had ever seen? The answer is more complicated and more fascinating than you think. See you next week.